Hello there. Facebook was a little bit slow today, but I appreciate your patience while we sorted it out. So, whether you know this or not, I'm Jon Saccas, and this is The Climb, brought to you by the Digital Mastermind. This is a show about journeys. It's a podcast where we talk to digital agencies about business, marketing, and technology. So if you want to join a group, a tribe of your peers, give the best tricks, tools, mentorship, or you even want to be a mentor because you probably know a lot based on your storied career, then join us. Join our tribe of digital agency owners. We stay in constant communication via Slack group for all questions, concerns, all those tips and tricks. And I mean some really gnarly tips, things on how to create profitability, how to form your contracts, how to speak to employees about certain things. We also have bi-weekly calls to stay on top of the latest and greatest and do check-ins. It's where I've met some of the greatest people in my life. And, you know, one of my great friends and business partners, David McGraw, who I'm about to come out here in 1 second. So go ahead and visit us, digitalmastermind.com. Shoot me an email, JON@digitalmastermind.com. And let's have a conversation, see if it makes sense. And this show is live, so any interaction, love or hate, more questions, concerns, comments, anything, feel free to chime in. And with that, today we're going to be talking about how to work less and how to make more. So, Dave, I know this is something you and I have talked about quite a bit. Why don't you come out here?
Hey.
All right. In focus. Focusing live. It's been an interesting week on top of an interesting year. And today, I know we have a conversation that we had with our friend and consultant, Karl Sakas. But where do you see that you could improve to work less, you know, and make more? Is there anywhere that you've noticed, or is this kind of a new broach topic?
I think, you know, setting processes up and documenting them so that they can be repeatable is, to me, your only path to working less. Because if you don't put it down on paper, if you don't put it down in a workflow that somebody can follow, they're going to have to ask you every single time how to do something. Or every time you have to train a new person, you have to, you know, take time out of your day to train that person. So if you're not going to write down your processes, you're never going to save yourself any time.
I think that's a big part of it. And we get into some of that with Karl, because he talks about with the process in the stages. But I don't know if this is everyone's path. I mean, I've spoke to multiple people that own businesses, and it seems as if that myth of creating a business where it works on itself is not something they even care about. Like, people truly enjoy the work that they do. So you know what I mean? Like, they don't even want to separate from it.
But there's going to be things within that job that they don't like to do that they can set up processes to handle, like HR or payroll or accounting. You know, they might love being an architect, and, you know, and they're running their own architect firm, but, you know, recruiting might not be their thing, or sales might not be their thing. So those are the things that I would tell that person. Yeah, do what you love, but find a way to get those other things taken care of. So all you have to do is do the things that you want to do.
That reminds me, I saw a quote the other day by, I believe the guy's name is Dan Sullivan. He created a coaching program, and somebody else posted one of his quotes on LinkedIn, and it said, if you're procrastinating about something, that means that's something somebody else should be doing for you. Right. I know some legendary procrastinators that are just, they wouldn't do anything.
Most people are.
That was the case. Yeah.
Well,
so yeah, I find that interesting. So with today, what we're going to be talking about is just that. Like, what are those stages? What are those processes? And what does it take so you can work less and earn more? Which I agree with you. I think it's one of those things that I would like. I just want to work on the things that I like most and let everything else essentially run itself for the most part with as minimal interaction as possible.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the dream?
It was my dream. I guess everybody doesn't have all the same dreams. So I mean, yeah, today's podcast is you're asking yourself questions like, all right, what am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? And speaking of which, do you keep a list for that?
No.
I used to. I haven't updated in a while. I used to keep a list like, okay, these are things I should not be doing. And it was actually very effective. Like I would like, all right, I need to have somebody replace that. I mean, as we begin to grow, I think that's becoming less and less. Maybe it should be the list of like, all right, what are the things I absolutely can't stand doing?
Well, I mean, our 40-page process document is that list. That's, that's everything in that process document I at one point had to do. Before we had an administrative assistant, I had to do payroll. Before we had, account managers, I was the account manager. So I mean, the entire process document is a list of everything that I've kind of designed for Oyoba.
Yeah.
So
the gospel, the Bible.
Yep.
Now, insofar as what people spend time on, I think is also something that's important. And then, like I said, the questions like, all right, what should I be doing? And then also even what if I'm a workaholic? Those are some of the things that I mentioned earlier, where people think that they they think that they're absolutely inseparable from their business, and that's what we're going to get into today. I know other people that with work like workaholic isms or whatnot, it's usually hiding something, right? So anything that's
right.
that extreme addiction. Have you run into people like that?
Sure. And I don't know so far to say as much as like an addiction, but in the development community, we talk about burnout, and that's all jobs actually, but burnout's a real thing. And a lot of times I would work late into the night because I always had this, in programming, you can't work on something and then just turn it off and pick it up tomorrow. Like there's an inefficiency there. So you're working on something, you can kind of stick through it, and it's just work. I called that work ethic.
It's like a muse or something that just takes hold and you just want to flesh it out, or is it because you can't find a stopping point that makes sense?
Well, almost both, because like when you're going down a logic, path, and you're on, you're on one of the options, and it's just, your brain gets into a process, and to get back to that spot tomorrow morning is a lot more difficult than to just complete it right then. So that's hard to explain.
No, I get it. But I think the only equivalent I can personally take when I'm writing something is the only time I know that I am really geared to write something is when I'm like bitching, complaining, or upset about something. Like that's it. Like that's it. The only time I'm like passionate to write. Every other time I'm like, I'm fighting for it.
Yeah, well, I completely agree. The most active I am on a like a message board is the day after my team loses a game. Not after they win. After they lose. That's when I'm like, oh, you know what? That's when I can write, all day.
Are you the armchair quarterback and you're just saying these are the things they should have done, or are you defending your team?
No, I'm mostly the realist. I mean, I call out what happened, and usually, combative against the people that are just like burn it all down. And like, I mean, take my Patriots, for example. I mean, it's the whole season's burning down, but I'm like, it's funny. The worst, the most people, I go the opposite. So I was kind of like burn get rid of Cam, cut him. Now I'm like, I actually think he's probably going to turn it around and kick ass. So it's because the rest of the majority has gone to the get rid of Cam. So I'm like, I'm going to take the opposite.
Just to be contrarian?
I don't know if it's that. I just think I'm like, well, I think the masses are in general usually wrong.
So usually, right? So it's the crowd of masses. But then again, I mean, so the Patriots is probably the most lauded after team since they've been winning. They weren't before. Nobody had Patriots jerseys. They weren't wearing those when I was in middle school and whatnot in the 80s. So I mean, based on that, what's that?
A lot of Vinny Testaverde jerseys.
I'm a Bucks fan. Yeah. There were no, but I was like one of the only person wearing like Bucks gear. So that's what I'm saying. So I mean, based on that comment, I think it's a little bit ironic. Everybody likes, the Patriots, and then you wouldn't go and find, the team that nobody does. I don't know who has the worst sales. Would it be the Browns, maybe?
Yeah, that or the Jaguars.
Probably the Jaguars. Yeah.
So.
Close team. All right. And I guess one last note on that. Last night at a dinner, somebody they were talking about the greatest quarterback of all time. And of course I said like Tom Brady, and they're like, oh, you're probably one of those people that absolutely hated his guts why he was on the Patriots. And I was like, you are damn right. I could not stand him. But now that 2020, the world is flipped around and, you know, we have one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. Go Bucks, baby. And go Tom Brady.
Yeah. Patriots South looks good.
Patriot. We call it the Belichickless. Belichickless.
Yeah. Belichickless Patriots.
Yeah.
Playing in Tampa.
All right. On that note, I want to talk about somebody that was really kind enough to take their time, and that was Karl Saccas. And there's a full interview, of course, that we'll post it in the show notes as well as some of the comments. But I want to talk about like his career and his climb and why he was so relevant to talk with us about how to work less and make more. So he started his first business, which was an agency while he was in high school. I think that's pretty impressive. He went to William and Mary, got a business degree there. Then he became a research analyst for an investment company. Then he left there. He became a business consultant for a couple of years, where he essentially worked in the tourism space and helped nonprofits use smart marketing to increase profits. Then he went from there to Cole March as a director of operations. That's an agency. He was there for a little over a year. Then he went to Hess Keith, which is actually the oldest web development agency in the world. He worked there for quite some time. And then after he left there, he started a consultancy where actually he took his boss from his former employer and became his first client. He's a coach that works with over 400 agencies, super sought after consultant, as I mentioned, and speaker. And he's also a published author of 2 books. So in fact, I believe this is something that he took the time with. It is going to be his 3rd book. So either or, his other books are fantastic, and this is going to be on his 3rd. So the question that we're asking today is, how can you work less to make more? And we touched on a process. There's some of these other things, but what Karl got into was that it actually comes down to a process, and it's knowing where you're at in that process. So I'd like to play a clip of what Karl says here. So Dave, you go and fire that bad boy up. Let's take a look at what Karl says.
You know, in the early days, it might be stage 1, which I call mandatory. When you are mandatory on a day-to-day basis, you are, well, just that. You know, as you build your team, you can't get away for lunch without something blowing up by the time you got back. You're probably the day-to-day contact for all of your clients, or almost all of them. And you're certainly working long hours, and you're not getting paid enough for what you're worth. And, you know, a way to know that you're in mandatory, I mean, you probably will feel it. If it seems like you can't get out of the office for more than a day at a time, you're probably mandatory. You know, the idea of doing a full week of vacation or even longer, yeah, if that's impossible, you're probably mandatory. Now, eventually you can move up to necessary. When you're necessary, it's still not great, but, you know, your team is helping out. They're handling some things for you. Sometimes they're even making good decisions as they're handling things. You can probably get away from the office for a few days, or, you know, away from Slack and IMs and everything else. But, you know, you're still pretty hands-on. You can't leave for an uninterrupted week-long vacation. It's better than mandatory. You know, maybe you aren't always the client contact, but you're often getting sucked in to solve client problems and firefighting along the way. Good news, there is hope. You can go from stage 2, from necessary, you can become needed, but not necessary. Now, needed but not necessary is a phrase that I got from investor Mark Cuban. You know, you might know him from the show Shark Tank, or from owning the Dallas Mavericks, or, you know, other activities. Mark Cuban has said that in his investing, he wants to be needed but not necessary. That is to say, you know, his money is needed by the firm he's investing in, but he is not necessary to their day-to-day survival. I've applied that to managing and running an agency. When you make yourself needed but not necessary, you're not going to disappear for a year at a time, but your team can make day-to-day decisions without you. You've become needed but not necessary. How do you know you're needed, not necessary, that you're in stage 3? Well, I mean, you know, a few things. You can actually go on vacation for a week or 2 and not get interrupted. That's pretty exciting, right? You know, your team is making good decisions. Sometimes things escalate to you, but it's not a day-to-day thing. And ultimately, you're feeling confident about your agency's future. Now, for many agency owners, they choose to stop here in stage 3 once they've become needed. And there's nothing wrong with staying in stage 3. But some agency owners and leaders want to go beyond that, and that's stage 4, which I call optional. When you make yourself optional as an agency owner or leader, you are just that. You can step away from the business for a bit. You could take a month-long sabbatical if you want. You could do, vacation in that neighborhood, and things are going to go fine. Like you're going to come back and things have probably gone smoothly. You're not going to disappear for a full year, but things are going to get done. And that's if you choose to. By the way, it helps to keep in mind where you want to go in your agency. I think of it as, a continuum, the agency growth style continuum. You've got lifestyle on one end and you've got equity on the other. And most people are somewhere in the middle.
So the 4 stages are, it just pops like that: mandatory, necessary, needed, and optional. And Dave, what was your first step in going from
mandatory
rather to needed?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this because hiring an administrative assistant was step 1 for me. I mean, I felt like before her, everything went through me. I had to answer every call, customer service, payroll, invoicing, accounts receivable, like everything. And so not only that, but when there was an emergency, when a customer, and let's say I was in a meeting for 2 hours, and then you remember when you'd come out of a meeting and your phone has been blown up? That's because you're the only point of contact, or you're the only person, and that was like killing me. And I needed some way to remove myself from the emergency while I was in a meeting, and that was when I got an administrative assistant, and boom, that changed my life.
It's fantastic. I think mine was a multiple of things. I think I more so outsourced a lot of the things. Like I never did payroll internally. I got a PEO to do that.
You still had to do it though. You still had to submit I
delegated that to another employee though.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean that was delegated. So I mean there was that, and then we had a former account manager who worked as an admin assistant that all my emails would go to him and whatnot. So I think it's a different style. But I think that one step was, I remember I took a vacation in 2010, I think it was 2010 or 11, and I was absolutely mandatory. It was brutal. Like I was just getting calls the whole time, and there was still a team of like 5, and it was just wow. Like, and then based on all that pain, I came back and there was processes and things that were put in place.
So people, when that happens, because that happened in my early career as well, people don't feel empowered to make decisions. They feel like they're frozen until you give them the okay. And so I had to really take a proactive approach and say, make the best decision on behalf of the company. Like, empower your employees to say, think about this from the company perspective and make the best decision possible. You probably can't make a decision that burns the building down, So when we come back, if you made the wrong one, we'll fix it, or we'll address it. It's probably not as big or as bad as you think it's going to be. But.
And tell them, I mean, some of it's just, figure it out. I thought one person just wanted to talk, and it was an employee that's no longer anywhere near me, but it was just like, do we even have to have this conversation? Like, it's not that I dislike you, but I left to not have these conversations.
Right.
So, and there's some of that has to occur as well. Things that need to be socialized, which was something that I was clear to talk about, because I actually did get a little bit of time to reflect. But I think it's important to ask this question, like, how can you tell which stage you're in? And it was something that I posed to Karl. And it may sound like an obvious question, but I'd love to hear what he had to say. I'd love for our audience to hear what he'd have to say.
If you are the only contact for your clients, you're probably mandatory. If you're at the point where you're starting to transition clients over to others on your team, you're probably making the shift to necessary and then maybe needed. Maybe you're at a point where you're the key contact for your biggest clients, but you've shifted smaller clients to other people. In that case, you're probably somewhere between necessary and needed. And also just how does it feel? If you are stressed out every day, you are certainly not optional. And you're probably not needed. You're probably necessary or maybe mandatory.
Stressed out every day.
Huh. Are you?
I think a lot of my stress is like self-imposed. I still have, and I go back and forth, an optimism problem that, and I've talked about it before, where it's just optimistic based on time and timelines and deadlines and everything like that. But stressed out every day? No, I wouldn't say I'm stressed out every day. I used to be, though. I would say between 2010 to 2014, it was, yeah, it was absolutely stressful.
I really haven't been stressed about work for probably the last 4 years, and I believe that coincides with being 100% absolutely debt-free. So when our entire company is structured in a percentage-based way where everyone else, there's like, I don't have any debt, and if we start losing some business, then everybody else's pay goes down as well, and so it's, I guess I'm not that worried about it. Whereas if I was loaded down in debt, and then we had a little pullback or a COVID happened, golly, I would be freaking out. Like, how am I going to pay my house? How am I going to pay this? How am I going to do that? So once you've kind of, that's why I advocate people to be 100% debt free. I'm talking about everything. Then, you know, things that happen aren't that big of a deal anymore.
I also think it's the mentality, though, of stretch and aggression, right? So how aggressive are you with your goals and how far do you have to stretch to achieve them, right?
Sure.
So I look at it like that. So it's sales goals that I want us to hit, right? So growth. And I think that's where a lot of that self-imposed stress comes from.
Sure.
And also pushing and coaching other people to be what you want them to be and the best that they can be. And that's kind of a weird balance, right? Because you get personal. There's maybe a little bit of a line that you push too far. So I think that's where a lot of stress comes from, just trying to push people to be the best that they can be at the same time, myself as well. We get a good comment, looks like?
We do, yeah. Ryan Parcel says, it's a step often skipped, but the leader clearly communicating the change of power or responsibilities and who to go to for what is really important. Otherwise, causes confusion, frustration internally with your team. Couldn't agree more.
I love the new graphics they got here. It's like a whole upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Clarity.
Correct. That's why it's in our core values.
Yep. Direct communication and clarity. It's not, I mean, the way that you say it is super important, but make sure the way that you say it is also stating what needs to be said.
So and maybe this is addressed in some future clips, but when you reach optional, God, that sounds like a dream. Like, what do you do? That's
not touched on here because you can do whatever it is that you want to do. You're optional.
Right.
Yeah, you could go and invest in another company. And here's something that I wanted to state. Most people that I know are optional in companies. They have a level of care that is so less than I've seen with others that it's like an attitude of not give a shit.
Correct.
Of letting things just fold out the way that they will.
That's how I feel.
All right. I mean, all right, that's good. If it's like that you don't care, I think that's great.
It's not that I don't care. It's that the outcomes won't greatly affect me anymore because I'm debt free.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly debt free as well, but I think that's where I go into the goals and whatnot. But I think that's fantastic that you have that.
Yeah.
And that's yeah, I think that's great. There's a client that we don't work with him anymore. I'll never forget it. $200 million company, and he was mandatory, like insane.
Miserable.
And he worked 7 days a week. I remember because he found out that I would work weekends at the time, and we'd have our meetings on Saturdays.
Oh,
and it was cool. Like I learned a lot from him, but some things I learned is like I don't want to be him either. it was just insane. So 7 days a week he would work. And the only thing that he would do for relaxing, and he had a cooler in his office and this huge like compound, and he would have beers on Sundays while he toiled around and he worked. But he was the only salesperson in this company. He was and all the decisions had to go through him, a micromanaging component. But it was an empire. I mean, the amount of things that he created, his profit margin, everything, super, super well-off guy. But that's all I did. And now he's got to be in his 70s. And, last time I checked on him, he's still working. He's still doing it at the same pace. Yeah. But that's that workaholic that I talked about. Sure. Like this thing to them, I don't even know if it exists. I can't imagine, like, if I brought this to him, if he would even accept it.
Right.
Optional is kind of weird though, right? Because that's when you dive in and you can actually piss off your own team. So I think that's something else that should be stated here.
Right. So that's the thing that I was really basically asking is, like, when you become optional, how does your team react to you being optional? Like, because I feel like you still have to set the tone. So if I'm coming in 1 day a week because I'm optional, then I feel like my team's going to start behaving the same way. I guess you have to install a leader that's going to be that leader still, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there has to be another leader that's going to do that. But I know a ton of in the agency space. I mean, you'll see optional, but you hear of the leaders, especially the old agencies where it was their name as a part of the logo and the business name. They were still highly involved, right, for the most part until the end, or they kind of shipped them off where they're like, oh yeah, you're just the chairman. We don't care what your feedback is. Yeah, you're a dinosaur.
Right.
And if you're okay with that from an ego perspective, rock and roll. You got the money.
Right.
All right. But I think it's the next valid question would be, how do you go from mandatory to optional, right? What has to happen? Let's go ahead and turn up that beautiful bean footage.
So for people who are listening, if you're currently mandatory, the way to get to necessary is to focus on a concept I call swim lanes. Basically, that's who's in charge of what at your agency. What are people in charge of? What are they not in charge of? How do you make sure that you aren't doubling up your efforts, and also ensuring that you don't have a situation where everyone else thought someone else was going to get it and no one did? The idea is that once you define swim lanes, people can make more decisions on their own rather than having to suck you in every single time. If you want to go from necessary to needed, it's about a concept I call values, goals, and resources, or VGR. The idea there is that you're helping your team understand what are the values when they make decisions, what are the values to follow. Those could be agency level values. Those could be values for you as an agency owner. They could also be values in terms of how your clients choose to operate. And each client is going to have different values. When you know the values, you can make better decisions without having to ask every single time. Goals are where you want to go at an agency level. This could also be individual team-related goals. It could also be, a focus on clients' goals. The more you understand about your clients' personal and professional goals, the better decision you can make on their behalf without having to, ask every single time. And then resources are what are the time, budgets, people, tools available to help get things done. Because, for instance, maybe you've got a solution in mind, but it's going to cost $1 million and you don't have $1 million for it. What's the smaller solution? What is available? And then finally, as we're thinking about, moving up, if you're currently needed and you want to become optional, that's about hiring and coaching. You're not going to make the leap from needed to optional without hiring the right people, with a skeptical hiring process and structured to make sure you're finding the behaviors you want, and also, coaching people. You can't just magically assume that everyone's going to get it. There's a coaching process, even for your best employees, to help navigate making that happen.
Nailed it.
Clear path. What was that?
I said it nailed it. I mean, that's exactly. That's great. I mean, I love the swim lanes. It's exactly what we've done here.
And there's nuances there, right? Because there's some things that are in motion, but I like how he clearly lays out each step and the VGR, the values, goals, and resources. So that's something to easily remember. And then the coaching, I think that's something as leaders begin to develop, they realize that silent treatment and those types of things are in passive aggressive behavior or only detrimental, good ones anyway. And
Right.
coaching is it's like, all right, look, let's look at this logically. What are the facts? What's going on? And then how can we move to the next step?
And like you say all the time, being direct. I mean, you're right. The passive aggressive stuff is the stuff that's what workers do.
Yep.
Leaders lead by being direct, having a vision, and then getting on mission. And if you're doing anything other than those, then you're causing drama in your organization, and drama sinks ships.
Yep.
So, yeah, and once you get there and coach, I love coaching. I mean, I love when I get to coach. So I think it's spot on. That was a great clip.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes into purpose. I remember one of my purposes where it was to help everybody realize their own potential. That was one of the driving things. That's one of the things that I love about coaching, and I really love what Karl said there. And I think the other thing is important, right? So now he's laid out from the mandatory to optional. I think an important question is, what is the smallest thing you can do that's going to drive the most impact? And that's what Karl has said here in our next clip.
I've developed a visioning tool that I call an advanced retrospective. The idea there is that, a retrospective is looking back. In this case, you're writing it in advance. Today is December 31st, such and such year. It's a great day because, and then you fill it in. So you can do that for any time frame. With ongoing coaching clients, I'll recommend usually they do it for the year out, right? So, in November or December of 2020, it's about December 31st, 2021. But you can also do 5 years out. If you have a milestone birthday coming up, maybe you're turning 40 or 45 or 50, or you're turning 60, or whatever the case may be, write about it as if it's already happened, and what's happening in your life. What decisions are you making? Who are the people you're working with? What does running your agency feel like? You also may conclude you aren't running your agency at that point in the future. And in a really extreme version, I've been writing advanced retrospectives for, at this point, a bit over a decade. I've actually started one where I'm writing when I'm like 90 years old, like looking back. You don't have to go that far in advance, but if you were to do just one thing to shift your agency, get clear on where you want to go. What are the benefits of doing that? Well, and check out the article on advanced retrospectives and the free template. But once you know where you want to go, you can work backwards from there. And importantly, you can enlist your team, right? If your team knows you're trying to accomplish certain things, they can help you do it. If your larger support network knows that you're trying to accomplish certain things, they can help you in that as well. But if no one knows where you want to go, they can't help you. And if you don't know where you want to go, you're not going to get there, or wherever there is. And going back to my earlier point, if you are running an independent agency, and this is true for just about all of my clients, if you're running an independent agency, you are the owner and you are operating the agency, odds are your agency is your number one or number two financial asset, right? Like, what else in your life and in your financial portfolio is pumping out a 6-figure annual salary and 20 to 30% net profit margins? And if you lean toward the equity side of things, is going to sell for, potentially a multi-million-dollar payday. Your agency is probably it. So I wouldn't leave it up to happy accidents. You can optimize your agency to make it better, to make it more profitable, to make it more stressful, to help you work less and earn more if you choose. It starts by getting clear on where you want to go. And then you can work backwards from there on how to make it happen and how to get others help to help you get there.
I love the retrospective idea. I don't know about going to 90 years old. It seems a little bit excessive for me, but I love taking it like, all right, 10, 15 years out.
Even that seems too much for me, but I love the idea of it. I mean, it's like writing down your purpose and then or your goals, and then aiming for them.
And you're figuring them out backward, right? So it's just, all right, so if I were here looking back, what are all the things that would have to have occurred?
Yeah. I love the part he even said at the end. I mean, I created Oyova because I thought I could do the work that I was doing for someone else better than they were doing. Right? That was it. It was a short term. I never thought of it turning it into like an asset. It was really just a vehicle to do better work without the shackles of shitty management. Right? So that's what Oyova started as. And then as we grew, it's like, all right, we're developing this asset. How do we make it? Now, I think because I do believe I've sort of achieved a little bit of optionality, that I look at it more as a change agent thing. Like, I want to create good employees that do the things the right way and treat customers the right way. Like, I want to, it's interesting. It is an asset, and I do think it's great for that reason. But I'm kind of looking at other aspects as more important.
Yeah, because something grows and it changes and it morphs, and all those are positive attributes of that. And yeah, one of the thing I get highest on in life is, it's similar to that, and I mentioned it before, is how can you help someone be the best them possible and get the most that they deserve, right? And along that, right? So it's self-purpose, and when you can get a company's purpose, something I say to a lot of our teammates, if you tell me what you want, I know what the company wants, and if we can align those two things, powerful things can happen. And that's what I think we've done a pretty good job of, is aligning ourselves with a lot of the people that have those same missions. And everybody has their own different purposes, right?
Oh, yeah.
But back to that clip, I think what was super important is, what do you have to do to create change? And that change is understanding where you want to go. And a lot of people will get in this emotional state where it's just hyper concerned about things that aren't as relevant as they may appear. But if you know that there is a problem, if you have that self-awareness, the next thing is just, okay, what is the next step and where do I want to go? And whether that's a retrospective or a brain dump or just posting something on the wall or your mirror that's saying like, all right, that's my goal, that's what I want to achieve. That next step can have huge ripple effects that actually lead to achieving those things.
Sure. All right, we got a good question here, or comment from Kels Murphy. I think an optional leader doesn't need to be present, but the team wants them to be involved in the decision making. Not to say the team isn't autonomous, but they appreciate the perspective of the founding member experiences. Thoughts?
That is, yeah. And I kind of go to I love that question. And we talked about it a week or two ago with Stan Richards, right? Of the Richards group. I have to assume he's as optional of a leader as they come, right? But being optional, and I believe
Are you referring to the guy we interviewed last week?
No, absolutely.
You said Keith Richards again. I was like,
Dan Richards. Dan Richards owned the Richards Group, one of the largest private agencies in the world. And he said some disparaging comments to his team that were then leaked out. And he lost Home Depot, Dr. Pepper, and all these accounts, right? So I think that's a great story of the negative effects that an optional leader can have by just melding, or just, toiling around the office and giving their input. Some racist remarks that people all had to have lost their jobs. I mean, those are some of their biggest accounts.
Right.
So I think it just needs to be handled delicately. Just because this is, just because you're optional doesn't mean that you should impress your opinions and things based on a company that's optional for you to work in. It's already functioning without you.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess once you trust your team, let them do it. Let them do their thing.
Yeah, get out of their way.
Yeah.
But I've seen it. I've seen optional leaders come in. I could think of one client. We'd go to his office, brilliant guy, and they had this program that did accounting work, right, in a specific way for them to do not insurance claims. I'm sorry, tax returns. And he would get in there and I would literally see all of his employees be like, what the fuck? Like he's in there like toying around, like customizing things. And they didn't even need him to do that. But he would just go in there just to show like, you know, here's my ego. I'm the one that built this. I can change anything that I want. Yeah. And I guess maybe that's just one of the costs. What got him there is potentially what's holding them back from greater things.
So we went through that. And, you know, Ryan, we are I guess call him director of operations now. When we were going through the transition where I was still involved, but he was kind of taking over, I mean, that caused friction with the team. And because he was doing it one way, I was coming in trying to do it another way. Because I would just be like, I don't give a fuck. Let's just get it done. Yeah. And he's like, no, whoa, wait, we got to do it the right way. And I'm like, just get it done. Like, right. It would cause friction. So now, through that transition, I've had to step back, let him take that lead, and it's, you know, that's working really well. And so that has given me more time to work on other things. So right. it's
So at a point you see your ego involved where you're like, all right, this is me just wanting to be right and win.
No, I've never cared about that.
Never?
No.
Never ever.
Nope. I'll admit when I'm wrong, and it's all about the client, and it's all about the kudos.
Okay. There's moments where I've had to like come complain with people. Like we're in the middle of a debate about something. I was like, yeah, this is just ego. I don't care. It's you. Take it, whatever. Like I don't. Yeah, it's like, why am I even arguing about it? I don't care. It's like, yeah, it's just whatever. And you know, and I applaud myself. I almost always admit when I'm wrong if I know that I'm wrong, right? But I think the self-awareness of just like, yeah, the only reason I literally care about this is ego. And all right, cool. On to the next one.
Yeah, interesting.
All right, and I believe we have one more clip from Karl, and this one's super important, right? It's kind of a sum up, right? So right now, if you want to go from mandatory to necessary or needed or optional, what action as an agency owner, a business owner, it doesn't even matter, or even a leader, what action can you take right now?
You know, we talked a bit about different bits in that earlier. You know, how mandatory or not or optional are you on a day-to-day basis? Then identify where do you want to go. You're going to move up one step at a time, right? You're not going to suddenly go from mandatory to optional overnight. Or if you think you do, you will be sorely disappointed. So, you know, identify where you are now, where you want to go, and then take the first step to start getting there, right? If you're mandatory, start defining your swim lanes. If you are necessary, look at the values, goals, and resources, make sure everyone on your team knows them, everyone's on the same page. And if you're needed and you want to become optional, work on improving your skills in hiring and in coaching your team, including whether it's Made to Lead, my book, whether it's reading askamanager.org, whether it's reading the manager tools, the Effective Manager book. You know, we can always get better. You know, certainly consider hiring a coach if you want to get there faster, but I would start with the free or low cost resources first, because those are going to make a big difference fast. And if you choose to apply the advice.
Figure out where you're at, figure out where you want to go, educate yourself, and take action. It seems simple, but it's not basic. Those are steps that you can take to certainly improve. And if you're in a mandatory situation, I would do everything that you can in your free time to make sure that you can get out of that, because I don't think you want to be that huge company, that huge agency that you can't take a vacation, and you think a party and your time off is a Sunday where you're just kicking back a couple of cold ones in your office while you're working. You know, I think you and your family deserve more than that.
Well, what do you think about, you know, there's probably a lot of people out there that have been thrust into the mandatory role this year because of the lockdowns and the crash. I mean,
I think it's the same steps. If you were able to get out of it, you need to believe in yourself and say like, okay, this is only temporary. I've done this before.
Yeah. Yeah. That's we'll see.
And you bring up a great point too. People don't realize that situations are as temporary for the most part as we want them, you know, to be. And when you find yourself in just almost any situation. It's typically not going to last that long. So I think if you take the steps necessary and the actions, believe in yourself, find the resources, put it together, you can either hire an executive assistant, you can outsource, you know, specific things, focus on the things that you want to do and move to that next step and be clear about where you want to go.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of little strategies inside of that you have to be aware of. Like, you know, we talked about it on a couple episodes ago. Get rid of any cancers you've got. Yeah. I mean, you can't be optional if you've got a cancer growing in your organization. So empower people to make decisions to get rid of people that aren't on mission. And that's really it. I mean, if you've got good people, your turnover, you know, flattens, your churn of employees flattens, your clients are happy, and you know, there's just a lot. You're in a good world when you're in that optional. And when things start to go bad, you start going, all right, I need to get involved. What the hell's going on? And that's never a good sign. So
no, certainly isn't. Yeah, I want to thank Karl for all of his feedback. Like I said, you can visit him at karlsaccas.com. We're going to have the full interview. If you'd like to listen to that, great conversation. We talked about management issues, talked about self-awareness. We even got into like therapy. He's got some great tips for that and other resources that we'll provide in the show notes. So check out karlsaccas.com, Karl with a K. And want to thank everybody that chimed in today. Ryan, I don't know about Debbie saying go Pats. That's more of a Dave thank you on her end. Just kidding, Debbie. Thanks for commenting. Kels, thank you so much for your comments. All of our viewers, everybody, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend, wonderful day if you're just listening to this on a Monday. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye now.